Middleweight just keeps getting better and better, and this is a fight to really look forward to. We have Impa Kasanganay taking on Joaquin Buckley, new Mansa, and Impa Kasanganay coming in on a bit of short notice, replacing Abu Zaitsar, who's supposed to be the original opponent for Buckley. Now, Joaquin Buckley was a short notice opponent to Kevin Holland in his last fight, and Buckley had just won a fight. It was a former opponent. He had to get the win over him, and he did. Really impressive knockout win in LFA. So a week later, he steps in, takes on Kevin Holland. And some days you're the hammer, and some days you're the nail. And Joaquin Buckley was a pail of galvanized in that one.
Before we go any further, I just want to congratulate the UFC. It is nice to see them give these people who do come in on short notice. And yes, they might lose, and they might lose badly in some cases, but at least they will give them another opportunity to kind of show the best version of themselves. That's all I want to say.
But Joaquin Buckley in that fight, I mean, what? Kevin Holland shot for a takedown really early, got it, they scrambled, they struck, Kevin Holland outstruck him, got the win. And I mean, Joaquin Buckley, we've seen it, I mean, in previous fights. The guy is such a good striker. He's got shoulders like bowling balls, and he's a nice southpaw stance. He throws really hot and heavy. He can close distance quickly as well, and just a very athletic fighter. And for Impa Kasanganay, for a guy like that, he's more of a slow burn. Like, he really brings it together. He doesn't start out maybe the strongest. He throws really nice power, and he's got a lot of whip on his shots. He can mix in a nice leg kick. And in the fight against Sugarfoot Adams on Contender Series, a lot of people were down on Kasanganay. They didn't like the performance, so he comes out against Maki Pitolo in a fight that, you know, kind of 50-50, and he really impressed in that one. I thought that he looked great. So for Kasanganay, you're building off of the fact that, A, you're undefeated at 8-0, but so far, I mean, really nice 2-0 under a somewhat UFC banner, you could say, with Contender Series in the UFC. And for Joaquin Buckley, I mean, in his last 4 fights, you know, 2-4, but the losses. Kevin Holland is a huge step above. And then down below, I mean, the loss in Bellator. Logan Storley, a lot of people don't talk about him because his fight style, it sucks.
Wrestling's gonna wrestle.
He's the most boring fighter that you're going to see. But it works, and he's a really good fighter. So Logan Storley, great wrestler, coming out of South Dakota, trains at Hard Knocks 365 with some of the best in the world. So that is what it is. The other thing that I remember we talked about with Impa Kasanganay, just briefly, was the fact that he trains at a Gym O. And if you're at all familiar with Gym O, let's go down through the list a little bit. Brian Barberena, you saw recently against Anthony Ivy, look amazing.
He's all right.
Okay, how about John Salter? I think that guy's a pretty good grappler. And we can go down through and continue to mention fighters that just fly way under the radar. Impa Kasanganay's there for now, but I think if he gets another big win, boom, he's really on the map. For Joaquin Buckley, if he can get a statement win over Impa Kasanganay, like he very well could, he really puts himself on the map, and that loss to Kevin Holland just becomes a blip on the radar. So this fight is very, very interesting. Height-wise, reach-wise, age-wise, they're the same. Mike Goldberg would even say they're virtually identical, except one's an orthodox, one's southpaw, and they don't totally fight the same. But it's a great fight. What do you think of this one?
So I like what you had said about Impa Kasanganay. It's a bit of a slow burn because you see people built like him, and you immediately think of like Apollo Costa, where they're either gonna just rush out there and kind of blow their load immediately, or they're gonna try to wait and just, you know, try to conserve themselves. And I do think Kasanganay has kind of figured out that my cardio might not be the best, but if I just fight with a slightly lower output, put more pop behind my shots, I'm going to be able to fight those hard 15-minute fights no matter what. And I think that's it shows that he's a really smart fighter, even though he doesn't have a massive amount of experience behind him. Because you look at 8-0, okay, he might make some rookie mistakes, but then when you actually watch his fights, I'm not going to stay and say that Maki Pitolo's this top tier middleweight, but I think beating Maki Pitolo is a really important fight for anyone in the UFC because he's a great measuring stick. And we say this, there's a lot of guys out there like this. I think Court McGee's another guy like that. I know he just lost, but still, they're guys who, yes, they might not ever be in the top 15, and they might not be in the top 15 in the near future, but they're guys that if you could beat them on any given night, it just kind of proves that you belong in that top. And yes, this is loose, but you belong in that top 30. You belong in the UFC, and you belong to keep on getting scheduled for fights. Now, as much as I just praised the UFC for giving Joaquin Buckley another fight, this is not the easiest fight to give him with a full camp. There's a lot of other guys at 185, a lot of exciting fights you could give him. Bevon Lewis is a guy who you could probably match Buckley up with. I just think it's a little bit too much too soon. I think Kasanganay, frame-wise and speed-wise, he isn't going to be able to do what Kevin Holland can. And on the ground, of course, Kevin Holland, he's just so unorthodox. There's not a lot of guys who can replicate what he is able to do. But Kasanganay, the physically stronger out of the two, I'd say they're striking. It's similar. I'd actually give Buckley a slight speed advantage because if you do look back at that Kevin Holland fight, his hand speed's great. It's just Kevin Holland's footwork, and he has a good chin in the end too. Like Buckley was able to crack him. I think this is a very fun fight. I think it's closer than the odds kind of show, but I am siding with Kasanganay because from what I've seen, or from what he's shown me at least, he's the more well-rounded out of the two. And no matter where the fight goes, I can kind of trust Impa Kasanganay.
And I mean, that's where it gets a little weird. You look at the Tapology predictions out of 611 votes, 89% have Kasanganay, 77% have him to win by decision. He opened a -245 favorite, now somewhat around a -260. So the odds have kind of gone back and forth just a little bit. And if you look at Joaquin Buckley, he opened a +185. He's now +205. So a little bit of change being thrown in the corner of Impa Kasanganay. I think it is a closer fight than those odds state. Again, you've seen the hand speed from Buckley, the fact that he's a southpaw. He was originally training for Abu Zaitsar. And if you've ever seen brother Otman Zaitsar, you know how good of a boxer he is. And Abu Zaitsar, very, very exciting fighter, really good hand speed as well. And that would have been a great fight. I think this one's a good one. I'm surprised Joaquin Buckley didn't open maybe a little bit closer.
I agree.
And this is one of those fights that, for a number of reasons, I would fade it. I mean, that's pretty much the only reason I have, really. But I think it's a good fight. I do just slightly favor Impa Kasanganay in this one. I think it's going to be, again, a slow burn type of a fight. I certainly, I take my chances with Impa Kasanganay. This should be such a fun fight. It's another one of those ones. You got the pop, you got the popcorn. You just sit back and watch because Joaquin Buckley could go right in there, throw an overhand left and just starch him. Or Impa Kasanganay could hang behind the jab. He could move in and out. Maybe not the quickest movements, but still. And really just win over on points. He's got the power as well. So I like that as far as a decision win. Going to agree slightly with those darn Tapology voters, but that's the way that I do see this fight ultimately going, and I'm siding with Kasanganay.
It's hard to disagree with that. I do think that Joaquin Buckley has the hand speed and the power that, yes, he could clip Impa Kasanganay at any point during the fight, but the consistency of Kasanganay and the fact that I know he's going to be there in the third round like he will be in the first round, it's really hard to pick against him in this fight. But if Joaquin Buckley does go out there and completely starch Impa Kasanganay, not that it'll completely get rid of the Kevin Holland fight, but you can largely discredit that fight too. Oh, it was on short notice. Kevin Holland, he's kind of up in the rankings anyways. But I do think Impa Kasanganay.
Just like when Kevin Holland fought Thiago
Santos.
Santos.
It works
Remember
both ways.
that? All right, Matt. I'm really looking forward to this card. We both have Impa Kasanganay to get the win. I'm really looking forward to a lot of the sleeper fights. Not just, your main event that you have to keep tuned in for. You've got Marlon Moraes taking on Cory, Sandhagen, Matt. So exciting. Really looking forward to it. And Matt, as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.